Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Valerie Leva. I'm a clinical supervisor and trainer with the training department at BHRS. I provide the intern training series. Associates and any member of BHRS are welcome to come to the series. And today we're going to talk about active listening and how you can use that with members at BHRS or anywhere that you might be working. So I'm going to share my computer here and get into the screen and start talking about active listening. So the couple of learning objectives today, we're going to talk about a 7-step model for active listening and how you can implement that with the members that you work with. And we're also going to talk about how to modify some of these skills for clients who are neurodivergent and also for folks who might come from a culture that don't have the same behaviors and ways of communicating that you or I might have. So let's get right into it. Active listening really is the key communication skill that allows us to take information, take in the information from somebody who's speaking with us and listen to them without thinking about what's the next question I'm going to ask. And you really indicate through the questions you do ask and your body language that you've heard them. We're going to talk a little bit about neurodivergence. This is typically a term used for people who experience autism, spectrum disorder, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Some folks use it when they have sensory integration issues, but it's really about folks whose brains function differently than folks who are considered neurotypical. And how do we have to adapt our listening skills and our communication skills with folks who identify this group? And also intercultural communication, the practice and study of how different cultures communicate differently, both verbally and non-verbally. We certainly have a wide variety of cultures in the Central Valley that you're going to encounter at BHRS. And we need to talk about how to do that. But first, there is a brief video. Please copy this link and put it in your browser. It is a 5-minute video. So active listening isn't just done in social work and counseling. It is also done in many, many different professions. Doctors have to listen, lawyers have to listen, plumbers have to listen. Everybody has to have some kind of listening skills. So this video is done by the Wharton School of Business, I think the University of Pennsylvania. And it is just a really quick, nice, clear, concise version of what active listening means. So take a minute to look at that and then come back to the collective screen. So welcome back. In that video and in a course called, a program called Coursera, which is listed here at the bottom of the screen. Coursera is an open and usually free, open and free learning platform where you can learn a bunch of different skills in all kinds of areas, not just clinical skills, but astrophysics and fishing and everything. So it's a really interesting platform. So this was adapted from Coursera, and there's really a 7-step model that I like to use for active listening. The first is focusing on the intent and purpose of the conversation. The second is paying attention to body language, then giving encouraging verbal cues like I'm doing right now, clarifying and paraphrasing information, which is really important, asking open-ended questions, and we'll talk about forming those in a minute. You have to refrain from judgment and then be able to summarize, share, and reflect with the individual or the group that you're working with what you heard them say. So we're going to take these steps and break them down one at a time. So focusing on the intent and purpose of the conversation. Um, when you start a conversation with somebody, usually you know why they're coming to talk to you, or sometimes people might casually come up to you and start speaking, and you have to listen to find out what the intent and purpose of the conversation is. So just be conscious and receptive to the other person, including what their goals might be for the conversation. Be respectful always and aware of the present moment. So don't interrupt them, don't step on the end of their sentences, listen to what they're saying before you start formulating your next question. Daydreaming, falling asleep, focusing too much on your coffee, any of those kinds of things. Just be present with the person you're talking to. So it's important then to take in the content and purpose of their words and their body language. So we communicate non-verbally as well. And all of these skills are meant to help you build an authentic connection with that individual, even if you won't ever see them again. As a service provider, you're going to need to connect and engage people very quickly, and active listening is one of the ways to do that. Step two is paying attention to body language. Communication is 55% nonverbal, 38% vocal, and only 7% words. So the tone of my voice, how I present it, this is all about the vocal and the vocal. Uh-huh, yeah, really? And then the nonverbal, how my facial expression looks. You can't in this video see my body language, but you're seeing my hands. I use my hands a lot when I speak. Am I sitting straight forward to talk to the person? Am I sitting catty corner to them? Am I standing up? So all of these things are really important to notice when you're talking with another person. And also think to understand about the nonverbal part of communication is you have to make sure that if you're talking to a member or consumer or any other person, ask them if they have hearing aids. Do they have their hearing aids in? Frequently, folks who are in inpatient settings may not have their hearing aids with them, or even folks who are outpatient might not have them that day. And also glasses. It's really important to be able to see the person you're talking to and be able for them to see you. So always ask them if they have their glasses with them. Another thing I always do, especially when I'm doing home visits, is there's frequently a TV very loud somewhere in the house where I'm trying to have a conversation. And I may ask the member if they could step outside for a minute to have the conversation, if that's a safe and confidential place to do that. Or I might ask them if we can turn the TV down a little bit or turn it off while we're having our conversation. Remember that body language is also conscious and unconscious. So I think a lot of my body language is unconscious when I'm speaking to folks. I'm really aware of facial expression because since COVID, I stare into a screen most of the day. So I see my face all day. So I'm much more aware of that than I used to be. And more unconscious about my full body language because you don't see it on a screen. So those of you who work in telehealth have to be mindful of this as well. You're only seeing your client from chin or chest up and they're only seeing you in that perspective as well. So you lose a lot of information about the unconscious body language and unconscious communication and nonverbal communication when you're working in telehealth. So, as I said, body language also includes facial expressions, posture, hand gestures, eye contact or movement, or no eye contact, and touch. Is the person wringing their hands? Are they fidgety? Are you fidgety? So, you have to be mindful of all those issues. Body language is very culturally bound. We're pretty aware in this area that there are gender differences in communication, there are age differences in communication, what you can say and how you can say it. There are probably socioeconomic level differences in communication. Some of you might be part of multiple groups or multiple cultures, and you have to code switch your communication when you speak in a professional capacity or when you talk to people at home. We all do this to some extent. I talk about having my professional face and persona. I speak a particular way. I speak differently at home. Much fewer complete sentences and mixed in with Spanish because I live in a multilingual household. And I'm not smiling all the time usually when I'm at home. I'll usually try to keep not so much a poker face, but a pleasant face when I'm at work. And, at home, I might get frustrated. I might be cooking and doing the laundry and taking care of family all at the same time. And, our body language shifts between the workplace and our homes. Our communication styles are really affected by neurodivergence. Most of you who are aware of autism spectrum disorder know that it is partly a communication disorder and a social cue disorder, which is reading body language and reading social cues. So we might need to be more concrete in our language and speak our body language a little bit more to folks who are experiencing autism spectrum disorder. So I might make stuff more vocal rather than trying to let the person read so much my body cues. So, for instance, um, I might say, "Gosh, I'm having an interesting reaction to what you just said. I'm wondering if you can." Be a little bit clearer about this aspect of it. So I'm telling them a little bit about my internal reaction, which some people could read on my face. That might be like, "Hmm," but somebody with autism spectrum disorder might not be able to read that facial gesture. So I will speak it out loud to folks like that. And that's usually a good way to do it. And I check in more to see if I am being understood by this person I'm speaking to. So, also when listening to others, really consider what your body language says. When I'm listening to someone tell a trauma narrative, for instance, I am not this animated. I will usually be rather quiet physically so that the person can express themselves and not be distracted by my body language. When I am speaking with or communicating with somebody who is hearing impaired, I will also be very quiet and I won't make a lot of verbal cues. I'll do a lot of nodding and more eye contact. So you need to adjust your verbal and nonverbal communication and body language depending on who you're speaking with and what their needs are. So step three is giving encouraging verbal clues. So in general, this is helpful to most people. Responses a listener, um, these are the responses a listener may express to show they understand what's being shared. It can be verbal, the yeah, I see, I hear you. Um, or a speaker might give verbal clues when they want the listener to pay special attention. So somebody, if I want somebody to really pay attention, I'm going to pause like I just did, right? I might speak more slowly. I might use my hand gestures or body language, usually we nod our heads a lot, to emphasize a particular point. I might use a different tone of voice and I might slow down. I might pause as I did earlier. So be sure to give verbal cues to indicate that you are really hearing the person who is speaking to you. Steps four and five include clarifying and obtaining elaboration about what the member is speaking about. So, clarifying and paraphrasing information fills in gaps in understanding and ensures that you've completely and accurately understood the point. So, a simple communication, for instance, a family member might say, I really need school supplies for a project tomorrow. I need glue, I need crayons, and I need a poster board. And so I'll say, okay, you've got a project tomorrow and you need glues, crayons, and poster board. Is that everything? So I've paraphrased it, or actually I summarized it. I used the exact words that the, we'll say, member was using um, to reflect back to them what they just said to me so that they know I heard them. And I'm also clarifying, do you need anything else in order to make sure I have everything they need? A really important thing to use or skill to use is open ended questions. This is who, what, when, where, and how. I tell folks with active listening not to ask why, because when you're listening to somebody, you really don't necessarily need to know the motivation for why they've engaged in a behavior or an activity or a thought, unless you're engaging in a particular counseling protocol. And then you can use the why if it's part of that protocol. But in general, ask people these clarifying questions using who, what, when, where, and how, because it demonstrates interest, it shows you've been listening, and encourages the speaker to elaborate. So, open ended questions are questions that cannot be answered with a yes or no. So, instead of asking, do you know the directions to the store? Yes or no? Or what are the directions to the store? Are you clear about those? That's an open ended question. Make sure that you begin practicing these, and it's hard to flip. I know in English in particular, and I'm Spanish too, I'm not so sure in other languages, we tend to ask a lot of closed-ended questions. But it's really important for us to learn how to flip our language from closed-ended to open-ended questions, because you're going to get so much more information from the member you're speaking with when you do so. Steps six and seven are concerned with refraining from judgment and wrapping up. So, refraining from judgment is exactly what it says: be open, be neutral, be non judgmental. This is why I kind of ban folks from asking the why question, because frequently, particularly in English, when people are asked why, they become defensive and they close down their communication. So, it presumes that you're judging motives or behaviors or actions. So, don't ask why when you're engaging in just a general open active listening conversation. So engage with the clients or the members' new ideas, perspectives, and opportunities. Be curious about them and ask them those open-ended questions. How are you going to accomplish that? resources do you need right now to achieve that goal? Ask those open-ended questions and avoid criticism and approach each conversation with an open mind. Even if you've spoken to that person a couple hundred times and every conversation might repeat itself, right? That is the nature of working with some of our members long term. So you have to approach each conversation with them with an open mind, even if you need to take a deep breath and be able to kind of calm your own physiology down so that you can be open and objective to what their needs or communications might be. And you summarize, share, and reflect with folks. Um, Share with the speaker a quick summary. So, what I heard you say was A, B, and C. Did I get that right? And reflect later. Sometimes it's appropriate to do it in the moment. Sometimes you might do it later with the consumer or the member. Reflect on what you learned during this interaction. Last week when you told me you were really struggling with the decision between transitional housing or just going to live with a family member, I really appreciated the way that you thought through those steps 1, 2, and 3. So this is feedback you can give to the person later. They might not have remembered it. They might not have thought you heard it. Sometimes you verbalizing it helps them tweak a little bit of their memory about it. And so it helps further not only the communication, but also the interaction and the case management and the therapeutic interactions you have. So I also have a little memory trick that I like to use called WAIT, WAIT, and it stands for Why Am I Talking? With active listening, it's really important to remember that we need to refrain from over talking and oversharing with a client. A lot of times when folks are early in their counseling careers or their social work careers, we think that, oh, this client or member is sharing an incident that they've experienced. I've experienced that too. So I'm going to share my experience of it in order to engage them. And that's not necessarily an effective way to engage people. In other trainings, we'll talk about whether you share personal information with members or not. There's a lot of different opinions about that. But when you're active listening, it's about the person you're listening to, not about you. So it's about that person, not you. And don't overshare, don't overtalk, don't step on their sentences, and figure out ways you can reduce the amount of verbal communication you're engaging in so that you can listen to the person who's speaking to you. So let's talk for a minute about neurodivergence and neurodiversity. We spoke about it a few minutes earlier, but this is really a concept where neurological differences are to be recognized and respected as any part of human variation. We're all different from each other in multiple ways. So this includes differences in social preferences, ways of learning, ways of communicating, and ways of perceiving the environment. And again, we talked about folks with autism spectrum disorder. We also need to learn how to work with folks who have sensory integration disorder or issues. Is the environment too bright? Is it too loud? Do you need to move someplace else? Do they have trouble focusing on just you when there's other conversation going around? So be mindful of these aspects and just always use an open-ended question with your consumer or your member. Hey, that's closed-ended. Where can we go where it's going to be easier for you to listen? Or where can we go where it's going to be easier to have this conversation? I think that's a more appropriate way to frame it. Remember that neurodivergent individuals may communicate in different ways. Typically, folks with neurodivergence have less eye contact and more limited body language, and maybe sometimes more blunt and unfiltered use of language. Some folks might be very direct or very concrete. And so, as an active listener, you need to hear that, reflect it, and maybe even adapt your style to be concrete as well, so that you are not relying on your nonverbal communication and your social cues to communicate with somebody in this situation. So use language that matches what the member is using so that you can be sure to communicate well. And when in conversation with neurodivergent individuals, practice content oriented actions like paraphrasing, summarizing, and asking questions. Do that don't wait as long to do that. Do that in shorter spurts so that you can be clear that you're hearing that person and they feel that they're being heard. So, what I want you to think about is a recent discussion you've had with anybody in the past few days. When we do this live, we talk to group mates, so I just want you to think about it. Think about a conversation you had with somebody. It can be talking about going to the grocery store, it can be talking about your afternoon, it can be talking in a class with somebody, and think about your interaction. Identify, you might need to go back up in your PowerPoint notes to the 7 steps, but identify the active listening steps you missed in this discussion. So maybe you were not listening and you were thinking about other things. Maybe you were distracted. Maybe you wished you had summarized or paraphrased some and reflected back to the individual so you were clearer about what they said. Think about that communication again, and then think about how you would have handled the situation differently, inserting the steps you missed. What would that do over look like for you? So, for some folks, it's easy to think about this. For other folks, you might need to write it down. Some folks need to record it on their phone and think about how would I have done that differently. So make sure that you do that and take more opportunities to do that. And so here's my challenge for you. Instead of a discussion, we're just going to have final thoughts. My challenge for you is to take an afternoon or a whole day or even an hour and mindfully practice these active listening skills with everybody you encounter. The grocery store, the bank, the student union, at the library, at the gym, taking a walk with your friends. Practice these steps deliberately and mindfully for even 1 hour a day. And mindfully practice asking open ended questions. You'll be amazed at how it transforms your communication style, your interviewing style, and how you engage other people. Because those folks, when you use those skills, will feel like they've been listened to and really heard. So, there are other resources for you. There is a great podcast called The Hidden Brain. I recommend it to everybody. And there's a podcast on how we process the information we hear and its effect on our relationships. So I really encourage you to listen to that podcast. And also, there's a great article in Psychology Today. So it's not a research article, it's a narrative article that has really good communication about nonverbal communication. And is it really a numbers game? How much nonverbal communication do we have to display in order for us to feel like we're being heard? So these are some really good resources I'm going to stop sharing right now. I hope everybody enjoyed this training, that if you have any questions, you bring it up to your coordinators or supervisors or field instructors or clinical supervisors. And feel free to let me know as well through the BHRS if there are any broken links in this training when you view it. So take care, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Bye bye.